Dear Diary, I've noticed that the moment someone names their sadness, the room changes. People stiffen. They listen differently. As if the act of saying, "I'm not okay today," is a warning label instead of a truth. Somewhere along the way, we decided that emotional expression meant emotional danger, that sadness meant instability, that honesty meant drama, that transparency meant responsibility. Like the person who speaks their pain is asking the world to carry it for them. But that's not what's happening at all. What's happening is much simpler and much more human. We've built a culture that fears feelings because it never learned how to sit with them. A culture that mistakes composure for regulation, that confuses silence with strength, that sees calm sadness and still calls it a breakdown. I express myself not because I'm falling apart, but because I'm paying attention, because I've learned that naming an emotion is how you keep it from running your life in the background. Because I believe sadness doesn't need to be fixed, it needs to be witnessed. And yet, honesty gets misread as intensity, depth gets mistaken for danger, and those of us who speak early, gently, and clearly about what we feel are labeled as too much, simply because we refuse to hide. So today, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that misunderstanding, about how self-expression became suspicious, about how sadness got pathologized, and about why feeling openly, calmly, honestly might actually be the most stable thing a person can do. XOXO, LJ. So today I just wanted to talk and rant about how sadness doesn't equate to instability. And the main reason I was thinking about this is because, as many people know, I have a written diary series. It's obviously coming over here on other platforms as well, but Instagram is my main platform as of right now. And because this is my real authentic diary, sometimes I post things that are really sad, really dark, and the purpose of that isn't for attention, isn't because I'm seeking, any form of comfort. It's really just to express, my goal is to be so drastically authentic, that it creates this effect that encourages other people to do the same. But in being that way, I get a lot of messages from people who maybe are worried about me or checking in to see how I'm doing. And honestly, it feels really wonderful to know that there are so many people paying attention to my mental stability and all those things. But at the same time, what people don't realize is that my social media is genuinely my diary. So it's just like when you write in your diary. Once it's written down, it's kind of cathartic, if I'm saying that word properly, but it's kind of cathartic. So after it's written, after it's posted, after it's done, the emotion is no longer within me. And that's the whole purpose of why I express it, and the whole purpose of this episode. I feel like nowadays expressing emotions is something that we don't perceive as normal, especially in the beginning when we're like just meeting somebody, whether that's romantically or an acquaintance. It's like more socially acceptable to lie about how you're doing and say fine, or I'm good, or I've been busy, instead of actually expressing how you feel in that moment. Like instead of saying like, oh, I feel overwhelmed right now, you say, oh, I'm fine, I'm having a great time, because that's what society kind of has taught us to think is normal, right? So when somebody shows up authentically and you ask them how they're doing and they're like, oh, I'm just kind of sad today, it was a terrible day, then everybody kind of stops in the room. And I find that to be such an interesting reaction, because it's like, well, why is expressing a genuine emotion considered as this big gasp worthy thing? Shouldn't this just be our new normal? Because then what happens is you have direct communication that leads to misunderstandings, because when you are so blatantly honest, like for me, for example, I'm a very literal speaker. And so sometimes my literal speech can get really terribly misinterpreted, especially over text. And right now people are terrified of communicating in person or over the phone, so they go straight into texting, which actually makes things way worse. Real conversations, while they may be scary and feel somewhat uncomfortable in the moment, they actually bring the best clarity. They end up being the healthiest, the most productive towards your individual journey and the path that you have with that other individual. But through expressing your emotions, you can really gain clarity for yourself and for the others around you, because now you know where those emotions are coming from, and you're giving yourself the space to feel them, which in doing so causes you to go through them. And once those expressions have been, completely evacuated from your body, you no longer have that sadness. Other people, they hold on to their pain because they let it bottle up, and they wait until everything is just like blowing open in order to allow themselves to express their emotions. And that's just not good. We've normalized breakdowns, but we haven't actually normalized breakthroughs. I think the one thing that I find the most frustrating is that I commonly get misunderstood when it comes to dating. I'm somebody who almost like blurts things out. I love to compliment people. I love seeing other people like smile and happy and laugh and do all those things. And when you are someone who's like that, people will misinterpret it as flirting, as interest, as acceleration for closeness. When I tell somebody that I like them or I think they're cool or whatever, they don't hear it for what it is. They hear it for what it could be, because there's so much symbolism behind the words and things, terminologies that people use. There's so much symbolism, inside jokes through social media behind those words, that when you use them for their original intent, people don't know how to properly interpret them. So they interpret them through their own personal biases. And sometimes when you've been hurt before, if you experience negative situations, those projections can become damaging to the relationships that you have with that person. For me, it's been the worst in dating, because I can tell somebody that I like them and they think that means I want us to move quicker, I want to speed up the dating process, or I like them more than they like me or something. But because I have such a linear way of thinking, I speak out loud. I think out loud. So if I say I like someone, it's because in that moment they are making me very happy, and I'm just like, you know what? I like you. But nowadays there's so much like ways to interpret that most people immediately jump to catastrophizing it, immediately jumping to, oh, she must have an anxious attachment, she's gonna want to like do so much more. I'm like, no dude, I'm having a great time on this date right now, and I'm just saying I like you, I like your style. Okay, I don't know what that's just what it is, nothing more, nothing less, honey. That's just what it is. But again, people misinterpret that and think I have accelerated interest essentially. But that's exactly why I also think it's important that we normalize expressing emotions without the need to dismiss them or fix them. I think too many times like people want to try and relate with other people and trauma bond because, they're bonding over their individual experiences and individual traumas that they've experienced, and then sharing them together, which brings them a certain level of closeness. But if neither one of those individuals are doing the work to be healthy, to become secure, they're just enabling each other. And you see that so much in female dynamics where there's like a best friends, and like when one or both of them is mentally unstable, and I don't mean that in like a bad way, but like they're just a red flag for themselves. Like if neither one of them is trying to heal or grow or be better, they just, reinforce the toxic mechanisms that they've built for themselves. And that's usually why they're friends. So instead of healing, the two of them are actually further instigating their toxic negative patterns. And I think that is a very dangerous dynamic, because when you have somebody else who's also as delusional as you get yourself into some dangerous situations. Not only that, but suppressing our emotions and pretending to not be how we are is just existing in a performative nature. You're constantly performing a certain way in order to get the reactions you want, instead of just being who you are and showing up how you're actually feeling and how you're actually doing. And, part of the reason why I don't even go out that much anymore is because of that reason. I don't like being labeled as intense, because I'm the type of person who'll be like, oh, I've been having a hard time, and in those moments, I'm not trying to make people feel uncomfortable. I'm not trying to be intense. I'm just trying to be honest, because for me, it feels uncomfortable to say I'm fine when I'm not actually doing fine. It's okay to not be okay and still show up for other things. It's not like when you're sad, you have to be hidden away from the rest of the world and suffer in silence. Like, you don't need to do that. You can express being sad without falling apart. You can go out, you can do things if that's what you want to do and still allow yourself to be sad. There's just this weird misconception that we just need to constantly grind, and we have this grind culture and it makes sense because our economy right now is terrible, so things are extremely inflated and most people aren't making enough money to afford that. Our homelessness has gone up, our unemployed has gone up, all types of things have gone up in a negative way, and it's damaging the mental health and well-being of the people within that economy. So now you got people who are striving to work so that they can attain these, assets and things and materialistic desires and lifestyles, because those things were massively valued in media, enough for them to value it themselves. But to me, it's like, why are we training people to value delusions? And the reason I say that is because if it doesn't exist right now, and there's no promise that it will exist tomorrow, then what you are hoping for is actually just a delusion that you have created. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to be a little delusional in order to become great. That's why everybody says that. You have to be delusional because you have to look at a life you don't currently have and pave that path out for yourself. So you got that. But there's still all these beautiful things that life doesn't show you that's beautiful because it's not popular online. Getting a bunch of trendy outfits will never compare to a trip to, London with two of your best friends. It's memories, it's moments, it's real life that we take with us. All these other things that they tell us to value, the designer, the cars, this fancy lifestyle of eating out at expensive restaurants, it's meaningless. It's meaningless fluff. That's what it is. Yes, people can enjoy it, but the reason that they tend to enjoy it is not because they're present in the moment, but they're excited to be able to say that they went. They want the content, they want the photos, they want the content to say that they were there, but they don't actually exist within the space when they're there. They're focused on how others will perceive their presence. And I don't like that. I don't want to live a life based off of a curated perception in order to satisfy others. That's the boss level of people pleasing. And I just feel like that's a majority of popular people nowadays. It's they manipulate their own perception in order to become popular, go viral, build a great audience, all those things. But they're not really fully being real. They're not fully being themselves. For some people, it gets to them and they become really successful and they start disrespecting people who aren't as successful as them. Ugly behavior. Just absolute bottom of the barrel behavior, honestly. And I think the other thing too is that a lot of times people have actually weaponized honesty as a way to harm others. Things like that is using honesty as a weapon to harm someone else is also just extremely toxic. And I just feel like we've normalized toxic relationships. Toxic doesn't equate to being normal, but we've normalized it so much that green flags are starting to startle people and they're running straight into red flags. Not because it's good for them, but because the discomfort of where they are is comfortable. It's if you're so used to getting punched in the face over and over and over and over and over again, and then you move forward and there's nothing happening, you might get so scared that there's going to be a punch coming that the suspension pushes you straight back to that repetitive punch in the face because it's familiar. You're living on a whole life of survival mode, but the survival mode doesn't feel as intense because you're used to that reality. But when survival mode starts to wash away, that relaxed feeling, that safety feeling starts to feel unsafe. And it's not because it's actually unsafe. It's because your brain is experiencing neuroplasticity in real time. It's healing itself. Because most people are like, oh my God, I need to heal before I get into a relationship. No, we heal in a relationship. You need somebody to act like a mirror, to act like your reflection of your higher self, of what you want. They need to be pushing you to grow, to stretch outside of your mental capacity. That is a good partner. So, it's more important that we focus on expression, that we don't weaponize our pain. We just simply share it. And the people who are good and healthy will come and comfort and do all those things. And some will feel uncomfortable, but over time, those thoughts will feel better. Because as I said, neuroplasticity, it's a real thing. Your brain starts to expand and it genuinely causes physical discomforts in the body that don't register as a brain expansion, but that's what it's actually doing. It's cleaning itself, it's expanding, it's growing, because you're now living in a new realm of existence that you've previously never lived in before. People are like, people don't change, like you can't change, you can't grow. It's like, no, that's an excuse for people who are unwilling to do the work to change. But it is absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible to live a better life than the life you have now. It's absolutely possible to do all the things that you don't even feel are possible for you right now. You just got to forge the path, and that path is not going to be easy, but that doesn't mean you're incapable. I hope that we can get to a place where it's normal to start expressing our feelings, because especially when it's like negative emotions, people just shut down. They don't know how to handle uncomfortable conversations, and justifiably so, because a majority of people are traumatized from previous relationships or friendships that have gone wrong, and so their ability to trust is extremely low. And we have trust issues. It makes it hard to be vulnerable. It makes it hard to, really allow yourself to even be happy, because you don't know how to receive love. You're so used to having to prove yourself to others. You're so used to having to work for affection that when it comes to you unconditionally, you don't know what to do with it. And that lack of not knowing makes you uncomfortable. And that discomfort makes people shut down. And the irony is that the only remedy of that is just to go and actually communicate. Put yourself in that uncomfortable situation that you would typically avoid. Because once you actually get to the convo, you'll notice it's actually not as difficult as what is happening when you just shut down. Because with the right partner, communication brings you closer. With the wrong partner, with a toxic partner who's incapable of change and who is incapable of a partnership in that time, conflict will lead to a worse, blown up situation where it's dangerous and unpleasant and sad and things happen, drama happens. That's toxic. That's unhealthy. That's not how conflict is supposed to go. In a healthy partnership, conflict brings you closer. It enhances intimacy, because the tension is then released through physical intimacy instead of through anger and hate and resentment. And that's why I love when people are like, I can't go to sleep upset. Because it's like, yeah, figure it out, go through it. Because when people don't go to figure things out, that's how things end too soon. That's how all these relationships end prematurely, or these people who are dating, going out on dates together and everything. That's how it ends prematurely, is because people forget that this is a new person. You don't know who they are. So you need to take time to regulate, to understand each other, to see what you're doing with each other in life. It needs time. It needs time to flourish. And a lot of times people won't allow that to happen, because a situation will happen, life will test you, and instead of communicating, figuring it out, trying to understand the other person, people shut down. They stop communicating. They don't even try, and they're unwilling to learn. And that's why we have so many failed relationships nowadays, because people are refusing to understand that their options are options are options are options are options. Okay, there will always be another one who's good like them. There's always going to be someone else, but you need to learn how to appreciate what you have right in front of you. Because if you keep trying to water the grass that doesn't exist, Eventually, you'll look into your reality and you'll see that your own garden is dirt. And that's what brings me straight on to the outro. Dear Diary, I think one of the quiet tragedies of our time is how many connections never get the chance to grow. Not because of cruelty, but because of fear. Fear of feelings, fear of vulnerability, fear of sitting with someone in their honesty without trying to manage it. We've taught ourselves to brace when someone says I'm sad, as if sadness is contagious, as if emotion is something that spirals the moment it's acknowledged, as if expression is the same thing as collapse. But the truth is, the most unstable thing a person can do is pretend they don't feel, to bury emotions until they harden into distance, to silence themselves for the sake of appearing easy, low maintenance, or unbothered. I don't want a world where people only speak when they've already numbed out. I don't want relationships where honesty is delayed until it explodes. I don't want to live in a reality where kindness and transparency are mistaken for neediness or urgency. Sadness is not a threat. Expression is not a burden. And emotional honesty is not a red flag. It's a green one. I'll keep naming what I feel while it's still gentle. I'll keep choosing language over withdrawal. And I'll keep believing that real connection requires emotional courage, not emotional avoidance. And if that means being misunderstood by those who haven't learned how to feel yet, so be it. Because I'd rather be real than palatable. I'd rather be honest than empty. And I'd rather normalize expression than survive in silence. XOXO, LJ.